We just got to look at Carl Jung's and Freud's. How we know for time? Yeah, I know we're going late. Okay, a little bit longer. Okay, Carl Jung's chart. His Mercury's in Cancer, conjunct Venus, but it starts. It never goes retrograde in his whole life. It goes direct his whole life. And as soon as it slows down, they'll go stationary retrograde. Just before it went stationary retrograde, he died. So for his mind went straight. Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, into Scorpio. He just built it and went straight up on this. But because, yeah, I want to say something here. Okay, we can do it in the next chart. But because it's just going retrograde, when he died in the 60, he died in 61, but it means his starting point for going retrograde was somewhere earlier in Scorpio. That was retrograde. That would go back to would it go back? So he didn't live to go through that double reflection time. He built it right up to as far as he could, and then and you can see when he started out, he hit the descendant in 1888, and then hits the sun at 1889. Got the sun, 89. He's only 14. These were the times when it went over his ascendant, where he was going to, he would faint, going to faint to get out of. No, that was earlier when he fainted to get out of classes. But this is the beginning of assessing relationships. Strong point of thinking about relationships and marriages and stuff. That went over Uranus. And sorry, we gotta have the. End up having a couple of things going on, but if they're organized, it's not hard. You just, to get the dates, I just highlighted them on the printout. And so when it opposed, for just Mercury, it opposed the ascendant, hit the descendant in 88. It conjuncted the sun in 89, the next year, but it conjuncted Uranus in 1995. Now, unfortunately, I meant to do. I don't remember the dates when he met Jung and when he met, but this was the beginning of his own independent take on things, and in this process, so it wasn't until it was a little later when he met Freud. But he met Freud, but then there was the square with Pluto and the opposition Saturn. This was probably his period of meeting Freud, the square to Pluto and the opposition Saturn. I'm not sure. I can't remember. It's early 99. It might be just before, but it was a very formative time of thinking things through and knowing what's happening. Then it goes up and it squares his Mars. Oh, the interesting, the square to the Mars. Remember what happened? The square to Mars. When Mercury squared his Mars, he was the camp psychologist in one of the German concentration camps, working with the Germans to be the psychologist, whatever he was doing. It was a doctor in the concentration camps, and that affected his thinking a lot. And he had to defend that or try to minimize that for the rest of his life. What were you doing there? What was actually happening and things? How much counseling were the prisoners getting, or what was it, experiments, or what was going on? So there's a lot of puzzles around this. This is a dark phase in his development, and it certainly challenged his mind and his thinking about that. It's in the 8th house, like it's challenging. So then it went forward, squared to Pluto, squared to Mars, and then it went up through the 8th house, mostly to his 8th house of psychology, the analysis, doing these things. It went up, and it went hit there's a square to Mars, and then it comes up and it went squared Mercury in 1928. It squared Venus in 1930, and it conjuncted Jupiter in 35. And as it conjuncted Jupiter, 35, he really started building up more and more as he got through 50s and 60s. His later years it built up, but he was still being prominent and building up and quite known for his own understanding. He broke away from Freud and did his things. Now, this was the red is when he ended his life. So at the end of his life, Mercury went retrograde in June of 1960. He died in June 61. Okay, so just after it went retrograde. And just before that, it squared Uranus in 1956. So from 56, going back, it squared Uranus, and he was pulling away more, but he still managed to get his teachings out, get his book, man, his symbols out. It went around the world. It was really built up through the 60s, and even his material got out to go beyond his lifetime. But like I said, you do any one of these, you really have to try and work it with the. I should have had the events sit down right beside it to talk about it, but then we would take another hour to get through everybody's charts. One more chart. We're going to look at Freud's chart.